We have the exciting matchup of wagamamatv against AustinShow. Wagamama starts with the white pieces, and what you'll notice very early on is a very weird g5 move. And there's a couple of problems with this. This isn't blundering a pawn from the start, but the biggest problem is that this becomes a huge weakness for black and a big target for white. So moves like d3 now already serve the purpose of attacking this pawn. And you could try to add a queen to that attack. You could even try to reroute this knight. The point is, this is going to be always a very big target that white is going to try to take. And so when you make moves like these, that's one of the biggest problems. Another problem is if you try to castle kingside, well, now you have a very bad structure here. And you'll notice that both of those things come into play. Once the move d3 is played, well, now already this pawn is hanging. Rather than taking it, he fianchettos the bishop, but that's still okay. It's still a very strong piece. But what you'll notice is that the pawn is still hanging, and black ended up castling kingside. So once the pawn is taken, look at this structure here. If you can get a queen or a rook on this file, this could be very hard for black to stop. And that's kind of why the game ends so quickly. You'll notice that queen moves over here to d2, already trying to take the pawn. The knight comes here to g4, trying to block it. And you'll notice that this is what AustinShow had to resort to because there really is not great defense. You can try to move the king to defend here, but then you have ideas of also adding more attackers. And in general, this is already becoming a huge problem for black. And that's all because there isn't a g-pawn to support h6. And so you'll notice that AustinShow blunders a knight here in trying to stop here. There is ideas maybe of cutting off this queen, but that still is not going to stop a very big attack that white will have. This is trying to bring attention, saying if the queen goes, I can play this fork here. But the problem is it doesn't really matter because even after the fork, once the king moves, you have a mate, and it's very hard to stop this mate. So the game ends with Wagamama taking the first win. Here we have game 2. Wagamama this time has the black pieces, and you'll notice a very similar opening AustinShow plays with the addition of taking out this bishop before you play d3. So I like this move a lot. There isn't a weakness here to focus on, so maybe d3 isn't as called for, but still, I love the idea that you take out your bishop first and then you close off this diagonal. Because you'll notice, if I go back to the other game, this bishop hasn't moved. And so in this case, it was fine, but usually you're going to want to activate all of your pieces, so it's nice that this happened. Now, one thing that I do want to mention that is very common in the Roy Lopez opening is if you take here, you're not actually blundering a pawn, because after take, black can take here, and after take, notice that there's this beautiful queen to d4 forking the knight, and you're going to win one of the knights. So that's why you're not actually blundering a pawn, but it is still better. Well, it is, I think, the better move is to move the bishop back, preserve this possible pin in the future, and also maybe try to reroute the bishop onto a diagonal that faces this f7 pawn. So this bishop is very important. You'll notice that both players castle kingside, and the knight goes here on g5 on a mission. And AustinShow tried to do a similar thing to what Wagamama did in the previous game and brings his knight here with hopes of attacking. But the difference here is that black has a way safer defense here against the king than AustinShow had in the previous game. And that's all because, again, this g5 push that happened in the start. And so you could try to add more pieces with moves like d3, but overall it's going to be hard for you to try to attack this further. One interesting idea that I do want to mention is f4 here, just simply trying to open up this rook here, maybe trying to get a rook lift going and attacking this h7 pawn. So that could be an interesting idea. I don't think this is the best move, but it is a move that you could see later on. There's also this move. So there are ways to try to add pressure on the king side, but in general, the attack is not going to be as powerful, once again, because of how defended the king is. Here you see the knight comes here, try to take away a defender from this h7 square, and this is a great move. The only problem is after the knight is taken, rather than taking the knight here, he plays the move h3. I don't know the purpose of this move, but the point is you could have taken here. One tip that I do have about this position, and every middle game position in general, is using the checks, captures, attacks method to figure out the best move. So let's say this wasn't that obvious for you and for some reason you didn't know what to play. Oh, let's go back. Well, what you could do is use the checks, captures, and a tax method. This always works in middle game positions. So what you'll notice is that there's no way to check the king. So you're already moving on to the next stage, which is trying to capture any free pieces. And here you'll notice, oh, I can capture this piece. I can capture it with the bishop or the pawn. But then if you compare the two, you'll notice that the pawn is way better. So if you couldn't clearly tell this, then always try to resort to using the checks, captures, and attacks method, because in more complicated positions, this is very simple, but in a more complicated middle game position, it could become very important and very useful to you. So you'll notice that black obviously takes away its knight from danger and trades here the knight for the bishop, trying to simplify the position with obviously black's advantage. And once again, trying to simplify the position, trading away the queens. And another tip that I have is that if you have a material advantage, try to trade away, because if you trade away, then your advantage becomes a lot more clear. So here, white should play a move like e4, defending, keeping this defense on the pawn, but then not trading the queens. But instead, the queen moves to e2. So similar idea, only not keeping an eye on this pawn. So the pawn is taken, and already there's a lot of possibilities to attack here on the king. And so you'll notice that the bishops come into play, attacking the rook. The other bishop comes into play, attacking the rook again. The rook forced to f1. And now maybe a rook lift happens. There is a very nice possibility here, actually, because the rook has now moved away from this back rank, and because of these three pawns that have not been pushed up yet, there's a beautiful idea, which is queen taking on b5. It looks crazy, but the point is, after take, you can take the rook here in check, and the only way to stop, the only way to defend the king is moving the queen back and then recapturing with this. So you're actually gonna be up material if you play this beautiful idea, taking on b5, but it is a very hard thing to see. And, even using the checks captures method will probably not really help, because you'll notice, oh, I can capture here, but both won't work, even though this one does work. So this is a very hard position to see, but that would have been a very nice move. Here, AustinShow just blunders a queen. After that, also blunders a rook. And you'll notice from here, mate is really quick. There's a ton of ways to do it. But, Wagamama finds this mate. So that's how the match ended. It was a very teachable match, because there's a lot of ideas that repeat themselves in all sorts of positions. So hopefully you learned a lot and you enjoyed watching this video. Make sure you guys subscribe if you want more of these videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.